This is the 2025 Lexus LX700h, an SUV I'm super excited to drive, and you may be asking why. Lexus makes a ton of generic SUVs. What's so special about this one? Well, this is the true heir to the Land Cruiser throne. In North America, the new Land Cruiser is actually mostly a forerunner. If you want a real Land Cruiser based on its own heavy-duty platform, this is the closest thing you can get. Why is that so important and what makes it so special? Well, that's what we'll find out today by going over all the features inside and out. We'll do the patented bike test, and finally we'll take it for a drive to see what truly makes a Land Cruiser a Land Cruiser. The most interesting, or perhaps funniest part about this LX700 is the Overtrail trim. Now, picture this. You take a Land Cruiser, which is known for being incredibly robust and off-road capable, and then you Lexify it. You create this LX model, which is more premium, but also more on-road focused. And then you take that LX and you create an Overtrail trim, which turns it back into a more off-road capable SUV. It just seems like a Land Cruiser with more steps to me. But here's the important bit. This Overtrail trim gets 3 locking differentials. It also gets 33-inch off-road tires, a myriad of skid plates, and an adaptive variable suspension capable of adjusting the height at every single corner. It's incredibly capable, and it does look pretty good. Although one knock I will say is I wish they would create a more unique styling. This to me just looks like every other Lexus SUV, particularly on the front. And if you're spending this much money, you want everyone to know that you got the daddy Lexus SUV. Last but not least, this is seen here in the color that is simply called Earth. What do you think about the Lexus LX700h? Leave a comment down below. This is another way that the proper Land Cruiser distincts itself from the rest of the lineup, because while it does have the same basic architecture and engine as something you would get at even a Lexus GX, the 3.4 liter twin turbo V6, it does have more power, and this one specifically is hybridized. So the base Land Cruiser gets a 4-cylinder turbo, which is pretty measly and rackety. This thing is a massive step up. 475 horsepower and 583 pound-feet of torque, a big jump in power figures. Now, the hybrid part is what really distincts this from the GX, because you can't get the hybrid part in the GX. It makes more power and, of course, gets better fuel economy, as we'll talk about. Now, it's paired with a 10-speed transmission, and of course, in true Land Cruiser-esque form, it is full-time all-wheel drive. This is not just a temporary 4-wheel drive vehicle, and that's an important distinction. Additionally, this thing has more robust axles and even suspension components than you get in even something like a GX and certainly the Land Cruiser model. Now, there are some pros and cons to this hybrid setup. The con being that the fuel capacity is less. You're only getting about 18 gallons of fuel capacity in this thing, which is not a lot for a big SUV, compared to the 21 that you get in something like the GX. Now, the flip side of that is, of course, this gets better fuel economy. We're talking about 19 city, 22 highway, which is pretty impressive for a massive, massive SUV. Now, because of that better fuel economy, they have about the same range, which is about just under 300 miles. Not super great for a SUV you want to take on a long trip. Now, the last thing I'll say is the towing capacity. It has about 8,000 pounds of towing capacity, which is admittedly less than the GX has, and you can thank the hybrid setup and the additional weight this vehicle has for that affected towing capacity. Pros and cons, but I will say, as you'll see on the drive, this is an incredibly powerful and relatively efficient engine. Transitioning to the interior, this feels price appropriate, and it's not just the quality of the materials, which is present. You know, you have leather, soft touch all over the place, even real wood in here. There's a minor use of piano black, but it is, once again, minor. So the types of material is nice, and that is a part of it, but the big part of it is how solid this feels and well built it feels. You close the door in this, it feels way more and sounds way more solid than the regular Land Cruiser that I drove not too long ago, which is the one that's based on the 4Runner. Same thing even with the GX. You close that door and it's very tin can sound, very hollow sounding on those vehicles. This feels like a massive step up. And you know what you should say? It should, because it's over $100,000. Now, outside of the material and the build quality, which is an important aspect of this, what is also great is how usable this is. Now, one complaint that you can lob in this vehicle is the fact that you have two screens here, and it's a bit disjointed. You can tell that they've had to tack on kind of their latest and greatest infotainment into a slightly older architecture here, because this screen here that controls things like, you know, your dynamic driving modes and also your HVAC is a different color and scheme and just resolution, frankly, than this screen up here, which is your traditional infotainment. So it is a bit odd in that sense, but these are very minor complaints in the grand scheme of things. You don't really even think about it after you initially see it, but it is worth mentioning. And in terms of that usability, you have some physical controls here for your HVAC, even for your heated and cooled seats, and even automatic settings for heated and cooled seats, and even heated steering wheel. Depending on the temperature, it will just set them for you, which is quite nice. And once again, you expect these things for a very expensive vehicle, as do you expect all the kind of goodies this comes with. You know, you have a moonroof, wireless charger, surround view camera, which is quite important, not only for off-roading, but also just parking. This is such a big vehicle to be able to kind of see around with this camera is quite nice. It's got Toyota's, or should I say Lexus's, latest safety suite, so it kind of does like adaptive cruise control, lane centering, and all of those sorts of things. But you know, all the buttons that you press are nice and tactile. The seating position is great. The visibility is good as well, and you even get a sort of dual rear view mirror here, regular traditional glass, but also you flick this switch and then it turns into a camera. I found that to be very helpful because I loaded this full of people and things and I couldn't see out the back with the physical lens, but the camera could see, of course, behind you. So that is quite nice. These seats are fantastic. They're a nice soft leather. I've already talked about how they're heated and ventilated. You also get heated and ventilated in the second row of this vehicle with this Overtrail model, so that is nice, and additional climate control back here. This can be optioned with 2-row or 3-row. So if you want to just have more space in the back and not have the seats, you can just get this as a 2-row, but you do have that option, which is quite nice. There's also sunshades in the back seat, or I should say the second row. In this case, the back row would be the middle row in the 3-row version. But sunshades, that's kind of a nice touch for a premium vehicle. And look, I have plenty of room back there. Not a whole ton of headroom actually at 6'1", but plenty of leg room back there. It's a very usable space, and this interior is great. It's just so frustration free, which is a nice change compared to some other expensive products I've been in. I'm looking at you, Mercedes. Before we take this thing out on the road, let's try and throw a bike in the back to see how usable this is, because after all, it's based on a Land Cruiser. It's got to be able to do Land Cruiser things. It wouldn't be a Land Cruiser test without a bike test. This is the 2-row version, so putting the seats down is pretty straightforward, although there's no electronic way to do that from the back of the vehicle. This is a large SUV, of course, although the back hatch area is a bit compromised due to the battery in the floor. Because of that, it's a bit tight to fit my extra large frame mountain bike. The back is plenty wide enough, but the height would be better if it was a touch bigger, although it does still fit. As always, if you enjoyed the bike test and the rest of this content, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button so you don't miss future videos. The LX700H, we are off. And after driving this thing hundreds of miles on snowy mountain passes, on dirt roads, on the highway, in the neighborhood, I can confidently say that this is still the ultimate go anywhere vehicle. That is what the Land Cruiser has always been, and this is still. So before we get too far into the conclusion, how do we get there? I want to start first with essentially what I noticed immediately. I like to start with first impressions with vehicles because just like for people, it's quite important. And with a vehicle, it usually tells you a lot about the vehicle. And the thing I noticed immediately about this is the insane levels of refinement. Because not too long ago, I drove the Lexus GX, which I absolutely love that vehicle and still do. But one of the things I said in that video was, well, you know, you can't get around physics. It's a boxy vehicle. There's still a fair bit of wind noise. And even though it's pretty refined, you're getting a fair bit of wind noise. Well, I retract that statement. You can actually get around physics because this is a boxy vehicle, just like the GX, and there's virtually no wind noise. It's incredible. There's also virtually no road noise, and considering we're on all-terrain 33-inch tires, this is what we're talking about in terms of the level of refinement that the Land Cruiser and subsequently the LX are capable of when they're in their own platform. Here's the thing. When we talk about value or value proposition, luxury items, and I've said this before, luxury items, value doesn't matter to luxury items. So you could say, sure, like the GX is a better value, but if you want better, it costs a lot more. Because here's the thing, if you want to spend $40,000 in a vehicle, all modern vehicles, I'll say all, like 99% of all modern vehicles are so good. Like they're relatively quick, they're relatively refined, they're just so much better than they used to be. But when you want to get that last 10 to 5% of refinement or speed from any vehicle, it is an exponential curve in terms of engineering resources and time and money. So, yes, the GX may be a better value, but the reason that this is $30,000 or $40,000 more, oh, this gentleman is going to let us go by. Thank you very much, or fine young lady, appreciate that. So, the value, all right, going to this experience, it's just so much quieter. Also, the other thing that this does significantly better, or at least noticeably better than the GX, not that the GX rode poorly, but this variable adaptive suspension is incredible. It's actually hydraulic based, it's not air based, but I mean, it soaks up every conceivable bump on and off road. I mean, I'm on a twisty road and this thing handles pretty well. Like, obviously it's not a sports car, it's not meant for this. And there's a little body lean if you are going high speed and you do like a crazy maneuver. It's a tall vehicle, it's on all-terrain tires, it's what you would expect. But in terms of bumps, I've been on, like I said, dirt roads, soaks up everything. And it's so quiet when it does it. Some vehicles, even the suspension might be good, but you kind of hear it. You hear all these like resonances through the vehicle, all those impacts. Not so here. I mean, this thing is, the suspension and the wind noise alone is like where you're like, okay, I can see where the money was spent. Now, the other aspect of this that you simply cannot get in the GX is this. Crazy speed for a giant vehicle. Not that the GX is slow, but this hybrid setup is really fantastic. And it makes a lot of sense for this application because look, we're talking about go anywhere, do anything in luxury, at speed, in efficiency, or with efficiency, I should say. And electric motors, as far as like propulsion that we have for vehicles, are the most refined thing that we have right now. Instant torque, and they don't make any noise, right? So when you electrify this powertrain, when you're going slow, it's often the engine isn't even on. You're just kind of like in electric vehicle mode, and it's super, super quiet. Of course, the instant torque from the electric motor is extremely welcomed. It adds to the refinement of this experience. And I want to reiterate that this is not a value proposition. If you want the ultimate, this is what you have to pay for the ultimate. So the ride is incredible on and off road. Of course, we've already talked about how quiet it is. It's extremely powerful. I mean, this 3.4 liter engine makes all the torque. It motivates this car extremely well, as does the electric assist. Now, one thing you could certainly knock this for is the stumbling that they've done to start the run of this 3.4 liter turbocharged engine, twin turbo engine that is. Toyota, Lexus have had to recall it a bunch. I hope they get it right. And here's the thing. Is this going to work for 300,000 miles or more with just oil changes like the last V8? I don't know. Probably not. I've owned multiple Land Cruisers. I'm a big fan of the 100 series Land Cruiser. It has that 4.7 liter V8 that mine personally had 280,000 miles on it and still ran like a top. I'm not so sure that that's going to happen here. I do think that Toyota and Lexus, in terms of the hybrid setup, I'm not actually terribly worried about that. They've been doing hybrids for a long time, and do you ever get an airport Prius or a Prius taxi when you traveled somewhere? Those things have like 500,000 miles on them. They're crazy. But anyways, I digress. The reliability thing, we could argue till we're blue in the face, but until 10, 20, 15 years, or 15, 20 years have passed, we're not going to know. So you can make that argument. But what I will say is the power is significantly better with this setup because of the turbocharger, because of the hybrid. And also, as you can see here, we're on a mountain up at altitude. One of the things that I didn't love about my 100 series was how just anemic it felt once you started to get above, 9,000, 10,000 feet. Even at 6,000 feet, it was extremely noticeable compared to sea level how much less power you had. You don't have that here. Electric motors do not care about elevation, and turbocharged engines are a lot less affected by elevation. So the powertrain, the ride, the quietness, and then it's the usability. You just get in here and go. There's no fuss. You guys might have seen my review a week ago from the Ford Expedition. One of the most frustrating just driving experiences from a usability standpoint. I literally had to Google how to change the steering wheel, how to adjust the steering wheel, because it was just not intuitive. And look, everything makes sense here. Look, there's a knob like there's always been for electronic steering adjustment. There's physical buttons here on the HVAC controls. The infotainment is so simple, and it hasn't crashed on me like it did in that Ford. And it just works. Everything just works. And there's no squeaks and rattles. It feels incredibly high, high value or high touch. It's the get in and go anywhere vehicle. That should be the tagline. Get in, go anywhere. If there is one car to do it all, if somebody is I'm going to give you a task to do in a car, you have no idea what it is, which vehicle are you bringing? This is it. Absolutely. I'm not just talking about off-road. Yeah, if they end up picking something to do that involves track driving, I'm not going to go around the track as fast as a GT3. But here's what I will say. I will do better going around a track in this than a GT3 would going up a sand dune compared to this, right? This will do everything. And yeah, it's clearly not a sports car, but it's quick, it's relatively efficient for what it is, and it is such a nice thing to drive. Look, there's only one or two things that I had to really rack my brain around, what is a downfall? What is a shortcoming of this vehicle? Because no vehicle is perfect. And there's really two. I would say there's not a ton of storage, which we talked about in the interior segment. And really the only other complaint I can genuinely think of with this car is the driving assist features are not that great. The adaptive cruise control works really well, but the lane centering, you put it on and it just it goes like this. It's like driving through an old movie. It's just constantly correcting. That is a relatively minor complaint. It is a legitimate complaint. Once again, no car is perfect, but guys, I drive these vehicles all the time, and it's pretty easy for me to pick them apart and say, this is what's bad about it, this is what's good. I had to think real hard in terms of okay, what don't I really like about this? Other than the cost, of course. But we've already talked about, for luxury items, you just got to pay to play. Now, I would love Toyota to offer or Lexus Toyota to offer the Toyota version of this a little bit cheaper, maybe slightly less refined, but I really love the GX. The new Land Cruiser is nice, the Land Cruiser that they're calling it, but it's really just a forerunner. It mostly feels like a Forerunner. This feels like a completely different experience. So anyone who says like, oh, you shouldn't be mad that they brought the Land Cruiser Prado over here and called it a Land Cruiser, there's a time and place for that, but I still want the Mac Daddy of them all. This is a dedicated platform, and you drive it and you feel it. And if you have the money, this is the car to do it all. So a little bit longer drive than normal, guys. If you made it this far in the video, thank you very much. But this Land Cruiser, I keep calling it a Land Cruiser. Obviously, you guys, I think at this point know what I mean in terms of this is the dedicated platform. It's important to me. It's a big part of the reason my channel is around. And if I had the money, I would absolutely be rocking one of these. For around $100,000, a little over, there is no better SUV to do everything. Once again, made it this far, hit that like and subscribe button. Really appreciate you guys watching. I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Peace.